Now to Ukraine, where President Volodymyr Zelenskyy says his army wants to mobilize as many as 500,000 troops, though he hasn't yet taken a decision on the matter. At an end-of-year news conference in Kyiv, he went on to say that no one knows when the war with Russia will end. During a recent trip to Washington, Mr. Zelenskyy failed to secure congressional approval for $60 billion in military funding. Despite this, he said he remained confident the US would not abandon its support for his country. And the president admitted that the Middle East conflict is undermining international support for his country.
Some say, well, Ukraine has been receiving our support for 2 years, and now Israel is facing a significant challenge. These were the voices that we heard at the beginning of this tragedy. And that is why this is definitely not having a positive impact on Ukraine.
Let's get more from our correspondent, Matthias Bullinger in Kyiv, who watched the event. Welcome, Matthias. What stood out for you?
We saw a visibly tired president here, a president that looked very sober at lots of the problems that have been there. We could not feel the energy and the power, the jokes that he used to crack at press conferences before. It looks like he's really under pressure this year. It's not been a very good year for Ukraine, and that was, of course, felt throughout the press conference.
So we have fighting currently at a stalemate, allies wavering on aid. Did the president say anything about a way out of this situation?
He was very careful not to give any prospects, blaming partly the discussion around the counter-offensive for its failure, because people had openly discussed Ukraine's strategy that might have given the Russians time to prepare. So he was very careful not to say anything specific about his prospects for the next year. He was still defiant. He was still saying that Ukraine will continue its fight and that his aims, their goals have not changed, that they're still working on winning back the territory of Ukraine, the borders of 1991, and to defeat Russia.
Right, so despite the Republican roadblock in the US Congress and Viktor Orban in the EU, he seems certain that vital military and financial aid from those two areas would continue.
He said that he expects the US to deliver on what they have promised. It's a package of $60 billion US dollars that they had agreed upon, and that the US will eventually overcome their internal political dispute in order to make this possible. And he said the same is true for the European Union, that they will find a way to deliver the aid that they had already promised. He said, however, that depending that there is worries that the elections in the US might change the picture, and that a new US government, presumably possibly under Trump, that would reject to aid Ukraine, would change the picture. That would also influence Europe. So there are certainly worries in the longer term, but he said he was confident that what had already been agreed upon, these 50 billion euros and 60 billion US dollars, that that the US and the EU, they would come around to deliver these.
So, and we have recent polling numbers showing that the number of Ukrainians who trust President Zelenskyy has dropped. Was that evident today?
He had been asked whether he would still be able to unite the country behind him, whether he would feel that this unity, also with regard to him, was slowly backsliding. And he kind of very defensively said that if in the future the Ukrainians decide to vote for another president, that would be the normal course of things. Let's put these sliding numbers or a little bit into context. Of course, in the first year of the war, trust in the president has been exceptionally high, with over 80%, around 90% at times. And 2 years into the war, with things the way they are, the war in a stalemate, it's not a big surprise that he does not reach these same numbers anymore. But let's also not over-exaggerate this difference. There's only 12% or so of Ukrainians who say that they do not trust the president, and more than 60% still supporting him. That's more of a normal number, I would say, for a president as the country settles into a more, let's say, maybe less exceptional way of dealing with things as it's settling into the long game. It's not that he has lost completely trust.
Thank you, Matthias. Matthias Bullinger in Kyiv.